Hello, my name is Connor Kester. I am the Director of Family Outreach here at Victory Lutheran Church. Thank you so much for checking out our channel today. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss a video. Now on to our sermon.
I'm going to put my whip down just so I'm not tempted. And I'm going to lose the jacket too because it's getting kind of warm here. But I'd like to thank Connor and his family for the donation of the jacket because we spent all week trying to find a leather jacket and I couldn't find one. So thank you. That was good. So this morning, as you guys saw just a quick snippet of a video you're going to watch here in a second a little bit more. But talking about the movie for this week, which was Raiders of the Lost Ark. How many of you all have seen Raiders of the Lost Ark before? There's some of you in here that have, some of you that haven't. Okay. I can remember years and years ago when this came out, I was trying to do the math in my head last week, and it looks like the movie came out in 1981, 82, something like that. So I was in the 5th or 6th grade, 11 or 12 years old, and I can remember when I saw the movie and who I was with. And it was during that time where all these big feature films were coming out, all these, things like Star Wars and Raiders of the Lost Ark. It kind of set a genre of films that we still hold dear today. And when I went into that movie, I remember going with my parents and my sister, and actually I knew it was a special event going to this movie because my grandparents actually came too. That's how much, I guess the film was promoted really well. It was something that people had to see because we haven't seen anything like that before. But much like this movie, as Dr. Jones plays a skeptic, as an 11 or 12-year-old, I was a skeptic too, because I didn't see how in the world Han Solo could be Indiana Jones. That's what I wrestled with, was that part of it, going away. How can you go from Han Solo to this other character of Indiana Jones? I'm not buying it. And so after we went to the movie, we saw, and you could see all the amazing things that were in the. If you've seen the trailer or you've seen the movie, it's an awesome thing. It's got a little bit of everything in it. But the kind of questions I had were, could Han Solo save, or could Indiana Jones save the day like Han Solo did in saving the galaxy? And then, but the answer was that in searching for the Lost Ark of the Covenant, Indy was met with a lot of just so many different challenges in that, and it's much like the challenge of life that we have. And in the opening part of Raiders of the Lost Ark, it's kind of where adventure meets awe. In the opening scenes of Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indy is the classic skeptic. He's intelligent, he's resourceful, but firmly grounded in science and archaeology. Two things that I love dearly, being a former science teacher and into all that stuff. I could see how this character was built and why it was an interesting topic for me as a young man. So when his colleague Brody refers to the ark as something that a man might still believe in, an army which carries the ark before it is invincible. And as Indy listens to this, he scoffs at it. He just kind of gives it a quick laugh, and for him, all the ark is just a powerful artifact, but not holy. So I'm going to ruin the movie for you. I apologize. But we're going to fast forward to the end of the movie, the climax, where Indiana Jones stands before the opened Ark of the Covenant. He tells Marion that he's with to shut her eyes, do not look, because he finally, at that point, he realizes this is not just ancient history. The ark is not magic or myth. It represents the very power of a holy God, and no man can look at that holiness and live. So this cinematic moment echoes the awe and the terror of what Vicar just read in 1 Samuel 5, where the Philistines learned firsthand that God's power is not to be mocked, borrowed, or possessed. So with that, I'm going to show this video clip of the ending here of where Indy and Marion are in the cave. And they are about to see what happens when the Ark of the Covenant seal is broken. And if we do have any young ones in here, there is going to be some parts of the scene that will be a little bit harsh. So if you want to just not look or cover your eyes during that part, but there will be some melting faces and things like that. Just your average Sunday type thing to watch. So with that, let's watch the ending here. All right, there's your ending to the movie and the climax of that. But today, as I was thinking about how to bring a message to you all this morning, it had to include that. Because we talk about in this verse from the Old Testament, the chapter from 1 Samuel, he discusses the power of God, and there's no better way to put it in this movie than what you just witnessed. And there are so many illustrations in the Bible that we that we get to see of God's power and how he displays it. But in the Old Testament, the writers do an amazing way of describing God and when his people do not listen. In this particular opening scene, as we mentioned before, you have a man in Indiana Jones who is highly educated. He goes and he digs and tries to find these artifacts. He tries to find pieces of history and bring them back to life. And that's what he was paid to do as his position in his job as an archaeologist and teacher. But as we go through that climax there of watching what happens when the Ark of the Covenant is actually opened, he tells Marion to shut her eyes. And at this point, that's an important part of that whole experience, because he finally realizes at this point, this is not just ancient history. The Ark is not magic or myth. It represents the power of our holy God. And no one can look upon that holiness and live. So that cinematic moment, it echoes that terror that was described. And that video just shows an amazing possibility of what could happen if we have that contact with God. As soon as sin fell, we knew there was that divide and that enmity between God and us. But we go into what's the second part of this, and that's the real ark, a symbol of God's presence, and that's what it was. The Philistines, as in the reading says, captured the ark, and they placed it in the temple of their god Dagon, thinking they had defeated Israel's God. But what happens next is both humorous and terrifying at the same time. So chapter 5 reads that Dagon topples before the ark twice. So just this statue getting in the presence of the ark where it was sitting at its precipice, they would go in, leave it, put the ark away, and this statue of Dagon they'd go back in the next day. It was fallen to the ground and it was missing its arms and limbs. And they would put it back together, put another one up there. The next day, it fell down again. And you could see God sending the message to them. This is that you need to listen up. That I'm not an idol, that I am real, and that he meant business. He needed his people to listen. So after that, not only did the temple priests see that happen, then the people started getting in an uproar. They started panicking. They started getting sick. The people were inflicted with tumors. Some of the translations, if you read, it reads it not as a tumor, but as a hemorrhoid. So you tell me which is worse. Okay, I'll let you decide on that one. Neither sound good. But you can imagine the people of that time, they're seeing this ark brought into their presence, and the ark comes into their presence, and all these terrible things start happening. And city after city pleads to get rid of the ark. They moved it to Gath, which is the place where we know that Goliath is from. And people kept having these tumors. They kept having all this panic. They had this guilt. And so finally, they got the idea that they're going to take this Ark of the Covenant and they're going to give it back to Israel. Here, take it. So Israel takes the Ark back. So the lesson here is God is holy. The Ark is not a trophy or a weapon, but it represents the presence of Yahweh, the one true God who cannot be manipulated or added to an idol collection. And I think that's an important statement. That's the thing, is that the people thought back then that all these gods were these little statues that they would just get down and pray and just hope something would happen. And it didn't until they had this Ark of the Covenant. So the Ark was never meant to be used for power, but it was revered for its symbolism. It held the stone tablets that Moses brought down from the mountain with the 10 Commandments. It had Aaron's staff in it and manna, which are all reminders of these three things. Okay, covenant, leadership, and provision. Even God's own people, like in 1 Samuel 4, the previous chapter, they tried to treat the ark as a good luck charm, and then they paid the price for it. Anytime the Israelites didn't listen, this is what would happen. They would have a setback. And so in this whole thing, to describe the Ark of the Covenant, why it was so important, those three things I just mentioned, covenant, leadership, and provision. God takes care of it all for us. And that Ark of the Covenant was a reminder for us and for his people that he needed his people to trust. So we look back at the movie. We look at Indiana Jones, as I mentioned before. He was a skeptic, and we see his transformation. The real story of Raiders isn't just action, it's a transformation. Indy begins as a man of reason. He needs to see the books. He needs to see the proof. He relies on his knowledge, on his grit. He got into all these different circumstances. But when it came down to what was at the heart, at the central part of all this was the belief in God, and he scoffed at it until he got in that cave. Then he encountered something that transcended explanation. He knew something was different when he told Marion, "Don't look." It's the first act of humble faith that we see from him in the movie. And he recognizes God is not to be messed with. So Raiders, it subtly teaches us what 1 Samuel screams: God is real, God is powerful, and he's beyond our control. There's a natural human desire, I think, that we all wonder, what does God look like? How can we put a face to the name? I think we all have a pretty good image in our own mind of what Jesus might look like, or how he might act in certain situations. But there's this natural fear and love that we have for God because we just don't know. And that's perfectly normal to have that feeling. But as we think about that, in the Bible, we have several instances there of people that are asking God, we're getting destroyed here. We need something from you. And the one that comes to mind is from Exodus 33, and it's Moses. Again, Moses is the man who brought the tablets down to put into that ark. But he had such a difficult time with trust and confidence. He kept going back to the Lord saying, "Lord, I don't know why you have me here. I don't know why you have me leading. I can't speak very well. I have a stutter. Put somebody else there. Put Aaron there. Don't use me." As a matter of fact, Lord, I don't know what's happening. I just want to see you. Show me your face. And in Exodus 33, God says, "No one can see my face and live." And you saw that happen in the movie. You saw that happen once that Ark of the Covenant was open and we were in the very presence of God like that. You saw what happened. And so God, being the loving God he is, he hears Moses. And he says, "Moses, you can't see my face, but I'm going to have you go up the road a little bit, and my presence is going to walk by you." And what we understand that to be is as God's presence moved past Moses, he saw the back of God. That's what God would give him. And you can see there that it was just another example of God extending his hand to us as Christians, extending his hand to us as his sons and daughters, because he does love us and he wants to see us on the right path. And so it's an interesting correlation there. But in that moment when they're taking the top off of the ark, and you can see the evilness standing around the ark. And especially when they reached their hands in there and all there was sand. And you could just see them doubting and scoffing. And we know that God's not going to let that go by without a lesson there. And then you can see what happens. So Indy, during this moment, realized that this is not just an artifact, that this is not something that was just like all the other stuff that he has found, that it was real and it was God's presence. So what are those lessons for us today? First of all, God's presence is not a tool. The Philistines and Israelites both tried to use God, and today, people try to manipulate faith for politics, for success, for identity, but God's holiness cannot be packaged. He doesn't serve us, we serve him. Let me read that again. He doesn't serve us, we serve him. So reverence before holiness. The second one is reverence before holiness. The ark was veiled in the tabernacle for a reason. No one could casually approach it. The moment in Raiders when the ark is opened without reverence mirrors biblical judgment. The unveiled holiness consumes the sin, and you saw it happen there in that scene. As soon as God's presence was there, the people began to see and feel what that was. They laughed, they scoffed, and then we saw God's presence come in. And God's presence consumed that sin and put it away. So our faith, number 3, faith must go beyond knowledge. Indiana Jones certainly had plenty of it. He had head knowledge, he had biblical knowledge. He could recite facts about the ark. But the facts didn't save him. And those facts don't save you. The faith does. Our faith saves us. So when he humbled himself, he closed his eyes and he acknowledged a power beyond himself, that he was saved in that moment. He knew there was something bigger at play here. And you can look at the countless scenes in that movie with Indiana Jones where he's getting himself into all these situations, getting chased by a 30-foot boulder, running away from that, running away from the townspeople. One of my favorite scenes in that movie is you could just see he's kind of over everything. Everybody's chasing him. Everybody wants to kill him. And there he is coming behind into the city market area there, and there's a wild man waving a sword. And he's in Indy's way, and Indy thinks he's going to have to hand-to-hand combat. He didn't have time for that. He just pulled out his gun and took care of it. One of the funniest scenes in the whole movie. But that just kind of shows you what kind of person and what kind of character he is. He was always able to get through it. It never looked pretty, but he got through it. And then in that cave, as he realizes all these things are coming to a head here, that all this biblical talk, all this biblical rhetoric that he hears, all these things that people say, it's just a book. He had his first encounter with God and realized that God is real. And so as we think about that, it's the same is true today. It's not knowing about God that saves us. It's knowing him through Jesus. Jesus is the true and better ark. The ark was a symbol of God's presence, power, and covenant, but that's just what it was. It was a symbol. Jesus is the fulfillment of everything that the ark pointed to. Let's take a look at that. What was included? The tablets. Okay, well, what does Jesus say he is? The tablets indicate that Jesus is the living word. And the manna represents Jesus in this way, that he is the bread of life, all scriptural. And the third one there, Aaron's staff, Jesus, the great high priest. All three of those are the things that we need to have that relationship. The living word, the bread of life, the great high priest, all those things that come together is what brings Jesus into our presence. The Ark of the Covenant was built according to the instructions that were given to Moses. It was a physical representation. It was a physical representation of a heavenly reality. Unlike the ark, Jesus wasn't kept behind that curtain. He came out among us. And when he died, that curtain, that veil, it torn in two. And that symbolizes the opening, the way for all of us to approach him and to come into his presence. And that's the amazing thing. We can see that God needed to have his intermediary, his son, to come here and have that relationship with us. He humbled himself. Jesus just didn't carry God's presence. He was God in the flesh. And he didn't bring judgment to the unworthy. He took judgment for the unworthy. So that amazing gift, as we think about this law and gospel approach, we see every bit of the wrath of God, the anger when people do not do what God is asking. But then again, God has so much love and he's so powerful and it's abounding in him that he gives us his son. And he says, "This is who I am. I am the living word. I am the bread of life. I am the great high priest." All these things encompass who Jesus is, who our God is. And so I ask you this question today. What will you do with the power of God? The question that haunts the film and our hearts is that. What do you do when you come face to face with the power of God? Or what would you do? Will you try to possess him like the Philistines? I think a lot of us would probably think about that. Like, I want God all to myself. God, I've got to sit down with you because I got a lot to talk to you about. Or will you reduce him to a museum piece like Indy did initially, where he's just going to be an artifact and it's just something to point at and say, hey, let's go put that in a museum or tuck it away behind a curtain? Or is it going to be the third one, where you'll bow in reverence and awe because you are in the presence of the Almighty God? And I think that's the one that we all will know. And when we come face to face with our Lord and Savior, that we will have that reverence. We will have that knowledge because of what Jesus came here and did for us. Amen. He is somebody that has taken all of that for us. All the evilness, all the sin, Jesus bore that so we didn't have to. And so we could have that relationship with him and his Father in heaven. So let's think about this, Raiders of the Lost Ark. It reminds us not of just the Hollywood fantasy, but of a real, holy, divine power. The ark may have been lost to history, but Christ is risen and reigning. And we know this in Revelation. God gives a little bit of a picture of where we wonder where the Ark of the Covenant is today. We don't know. But we do know in Revelation that God gives a quick snippet of that, saying that there is an ark in heaven. And that is that reminder of presence there. And some folks believe that, the ark is buried in a temple in Ethiopia somewhere. Some people think it's somewhere in one of the Israeli temples. Nobody knows, except for God. And I cling to that piece in Revelation with knowing that the ark is where it needs to be, wherever that may be, and that the artifacts or whatever was included with the manna, the staff, and the 10 Commandments, those are just what they are. But Jesus came and fulfilled that on our behalf. And so thank God for that.